There's a whole world in which there's activities that are really valuable that would normally be the function of leaders that I think AI can enable.
AI can now be an active listener, truly understand what you're thinking, and blend that to the organization. AI can do that 10x better than some of the average managers.
Nobody's an individual contributor anymore. Everybody's just a manager of agents. Shweta and Hari, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having us.
Awesome.
So we were talking about a very futuristic scenario that got me excited, and I thought we should press record right away. And so, Hari, you were telling me that knowledge work is going to look very, very different. Organizations are going to look very different. And there's actually going to be AI agents as coworkers, and not just individual contributors, but you think that even there's going to be AI agent executives. Is that tell us what is your vision of the world in the future?
Absolutely. I mean, so there's certain superpowers that you wish that you would have as an executive. Like maybe we've all seen Undercover Boss, right? And you have this ability to go down and these folks talk to everyone in the organization, know what's really going, make critical fixes. And it's like in a world with AI, you can actually do that. You can have an AI that goes and talks to people and comes back and says, these are strategic operational improvements you can make that normally would require execs to be embedded down there. So there's a whole world in which there's activities that are really valuable that we don't have time for today that I think AI can enable that would normally be the function of leaders.
I mean, it's a crazy thought, right? Because I remember, very recently, we had this summit. We brought all of our employees, and we're constantly trying to make ourselves more AI native. And as soon as I think we get more AI native, then technology moves, and I'm like, we're not AI native enough. But in my talk, I had this piece where I was like, nobody's an individual contributor anymore. Everybody's just a manager of agents. And my view largely has been we're going to have a lot of this IC work be done by agents, and then it's going to be about managers and managers who have taste and know the type of work and the quality of the work. But this is a new way of thinking in that the managers themselves can potentially be replaced by agents. Is that a good way to think about it, or is that kind of the future that you all are building towards?
I'll share my perspective, and then Shweta, feel free to share yours. I would say, obviously, the world is going to change, and what a manager does today is going to be very different in the future. Like you said, managing armies of AI agents, perhaps. And so I think that what taste is and what a manager does and means is very different because today, a lot of what managers do is understand what their boss wants and try to make that solution happen, right? Like coach their team, mentor them, and make it happen. But a lot of folks are too busy to do that, right? Like they're not spending their time talking to everyone, communicating perfectly. Maybe they're amazing engineers or marketers, but they're not the best managers. And so, in a world in which AI is able to know exactly what's happening across the team, is looking at the artifacts, talking to people, maybe a lot of those functions are going to be better done by AI because of the scale and the ease in which it can just do it almost instantly. So now it's like, how do we empower each person to be at their best while respecting confidentiality and trust? And those are some of the things we've got to think about as we, design and build towards our AI coworkers.
And I'd like to add a little bit to that. A lot of managers' work revolves around, people improvement, understanding what are everybody's incentives, how do you move towards the one vision. And a lot of that experience, AI can now bring in and be an active listener, be on your side, truly understand what you're thinking, where your worldview is, what do you believe in, and blend that to the organization. And, AI can do that 10x better than some of the average managers. You have very rare, for me, in my experience, there has been like one out of many managers that I've had that has been excellent at people management. And how do you bring AI into that space to be able to do that for everybody? That's basically the thought there.
It's super interesting. One of the things that I'm starting to think now is that it's not that there won't be any ICs and everyone's a manager, that there won't be managers and everyone's an IC, but it just seems like the roles are just going to change, and the maybe we're going to have new terms for all of these things. But yeah, certainly AI is painting this new picture. So lots for us to talk about today. You both are, founders of a new startup called HaloVision, which I'm super interested in. As our longtime listeners know, I used to run the Super Managers podcast, and now obviously with Fellow, we're working on all AI things, but the intersection of management and AI is of high interest. So, why don't you all explain what is HaloVision, and what are you all trying to achieve?
And a lot of companies, leaders don't have the time to get ground truth information about what's happening and make really effective, fast decisions about what's going on across the organization. And so they lose a lot of money opportunities. Employees feel like they're working on things that don't matter. And so what Halo does is it has these confidential conversations with every employee one on one to really understand their perspective on their goals, on their challenges, on what's happening on the ground, how they're working. And then Halo will take all these things and analyze and figure out, okay, like what is the implication of this on management? Like, can we make a different decision? Can we make a better decision that'll result in better outcomes, more engaged people? And ultimately, the difference is Halo, as being very focused on management, especially metrics and outcomes, is going to measure everything. So it's not just like a suggestion box. It's going to take whatever people say, dig deeper, get quantified, assess the problem, put dollar values on it, and then present recs to executives. And when execs share their perspective to Halo, Halo explains it to everybody else. So it's a bidirectional communication channel that scales the perspective of the executive to everyone in the organization while helping execs make rapid, fast decisions that are quantified that would actually help their employees and their company grow.
Super interesting. So it's one of those things where I remember when we were, when I was doing the Super Managers podcast and, 250 episodes, obviously one-on-ones, skip level meetings. This was a constant topic, right? How do you do them better? How often do you do them? How to do them right versus wrong. But they required a lot of time. Like, this is one of the things. And then there was all this controversy. I don't know how many people were following this stuff, but there was all this controversy, a few years back where there was a bunch of people coming out and saying, don't do one-on-ones. Jensen Huang doesn't do one-on-ones, and he has 50 direct reports. And so if he doesn't do it, then other people don't need to do it. And then there was this whole movement around, heck, I even tried this for a while, which was rather than doing one-on-one meetings, trying to do like three-person meetings. And there was all these like variations of it, but obviously the one-on-one has a lot of benefit. So this is kind of like taking that concept and it's basically scaling it. So everybody in the company actually has a one-on-one with almost like this AI manager. I mean, I don't know that you all call it that, but I'm gonna interpret it that way. And again, this is like a super smart PhD in every topic, and so it just has perfect recall, can understand all of the things that are being talked about. And yeah, and then it can just like roll up the information that people need to know to the right people.
Yeah, I think
Is
Yeah.
that good explanation?
the one thing I would just tweak there is that remember that this is a third party. And so it's not like it's the manager's spy, right? Like we're a third party, it's confidential. So we don't share any of this with leadership unless we were very selective about how we do it. And that's why employees open up to us. Because if we were the company's AI agent doing this thing, they wouldn't say it. It's the same kind of dynamics and risk you have sharing things to like HR or to your own manager versus when you're talking to a third party outside, people just completely open up, and that's really why we're able to get such high quality, rich data.
And that's a difference between what we are seeing. Like some of the people who talk to Halo are like, I am able to open up more to Halo because it's judgment free. I am able to say, however, like the content, I don't have to frame it in a way that the other person will be able to understand, which is a lot of what communication is about, right? People are doing that constantly. And especially ICs at the lower level, they might not have the skill set. And like you said, one on ones, there's a lot of controversy around it recently. What are effective one on ones? Do they even matter? And so Halo comes in and says, you know what? I am here to listen to you and understand your perspective and non judgmental space, and gives you the psychological safety to say exactly what you want to say.
It's super interesting. It also, I mean, fun fact about my background in that, I used to also work at SurveyMonkey. We sold my last company, SurveyMonkey. And so, especially like in the employee survey space, there's a lot of products and companies out there that play that third party role. I mean, SurveyMonkey didn't, but there's companies that play that role that will do employee satisfaction stuff. But in order to get the employees to, be able to share the information that they want, there's a third party. They're not going to share information directly. When you do a drill down, you're not going to be able to figure out exactly who said what. So there's all these services. So you're kind of taking like these two concepts of a one-on-one and a survey and kind of like mixing them into
And
one.
the executive thing, right? Because a lot of folks have to like they're not going to share unless, what we've learned from doing this is that first of all, you have to ask really smart questions. And smart doesn't mean the kind of smart that you have at ChatGPT, right? Smart means that it knows what your teammates are thinking, kind of knows what your boss is working towards. It has the context across the organization. And so you're having an informed conversation that doesn't feel like you're starting over by explaining everything. You're actually going to do it in a way that's empathetic but directed. So one is just that, but two is they have to believe it's going to result in change. Otherwise, it's just performative, right? And so that's why for us, we start with the CEO or we start with the C level and then implement it because they know there's buy-in. And at that point, the employees are like, oh wow, leaders are listening. They actually care. And now they're going to share because they really believe it's going to result in something useful. And that's why we also tell leaders like, hey man, like if you're going to do this, or there's going to be a feedback loop. And if it looks like you're not going to take any action or anything, it's not helpful. So just be careful because it's a double-edged sword when you take this feedback. But we also will tell employees, look, of the five things you mentioned, we're going to bring up numbers 1 and 2 to the leaders, but not these other three. And here's why. It's because they didn't rank high enough in terms of impact or time frame, or like it just didn't appear very urgent. And if you have data that argue otherwise, then sure, share it. But at least that way there's a full feedback loop and people aren't in the dark and being like, what happened to this feedback and what's going on. So that transparency comes along, and that's how we are able to facilitate this alignment.
It's super interesting. It's almost like a survey that understands you, and it was almost like built for you. All the questions were built for what are the highest impact questions that I could ask you.
Exactly. That's it. That's why this is not an HR play because it's very compute heavy. And that's why it's technically challenging to pull off versus a generic survey.
Let's talk about this. So again, very interesting space. I'm glad we kind of went through it because now I want to shift towards I want to shift towards what it's like to run this company. So you're an AI native team, and your background's very interesting. Like just super high level. I know you both worked on AI initiatives. Before this, Shweta, you were doing stuff in AI at Zoom, right? What was your like roughly the kind of stuff you were working on?
I mean, Zoom, my journey was, evolved over time. I was in finance first, then trust and safety, then go to market. And then each of those different domains, my goal was to build AI data products that could enable business teams to move faster, make better decisions. Towards the end, in the go to market side, we started bringing in AI agent frameworks to figure out, okay, how do customer support or sales teams or marketing teams do better. Like, of course, there is the churn prediction, there is cross sell, upsell, all of these AI things that teams do. But how do you make that work in the workflow that these teams are doing? So that was my focus at Zoom.
Awesome. And all right, what was your background?
So I studied computer science and product design. I was the software engineer, and then I started a company in the childcare space, like an Airbnb for daycares kind of play. And then I did this thing in the construction space to help basically teams on the ground and leaders in the office collaborate in real time for fiber to the curb and work builds. And then I joined Cisco to do new ventures there and due diligence on new venture ideas and work with engineers to build new ideas.
Hey everyone, just a quick pause on today's episode to tell you about my day job. In addition to This New Way, I'm the CEO of a company called Fellow.ai, and Fellow is an AI meeting assistant. It joins all your meetings, it summarizes them, tracks the action items and the decision, and does that better than any other tool that you've seen. We've spent a ton of time making sure that the meeting notes and summaries and action items that come out of Fellow are the most accurate, the most precise. It beats any human. You have to try it. But in addition to that, what makes Fellow different is that it is the first AI note taker built from the ground up with security and privacy in mind. This means that you can use it for all your meetings, not just the customer-facing ones, but also the sensitive ones, things like one-on-ones and executive team meetings and those QBRs and everything in between. It's got really good judgment. So for example, if you start a meeting and you're talking about some social stuff that you don't really want on the record that's going to get emailed to everyone afterwards, Fellow just knows. It just doesn't include those things. or say you have something that you talked about and later on you realize, oh man, that shouldn't have been there, it makes it really easy. You can go back to the meeting, select that part, delete it, and then it's gone from the record. It connects to all of the other tools you use in the organization, whether that's Slack or Asana or HubSpot or Salesforce or Linear or Jira or Confluence, whatever it is, Fellow integrates with all those things. I think the best part is that Fellow also acts as an AI chief of staff. Because it sits on all the meetings and the conversations that you have access to, you can ask it really cool questions such as, what are the biggest opportunities in my company? What are the bottlenecks in engineering? And Fellow just pieces together information, sees trends, and it can answer those sorts of questions. It can even do things like, hey, based on all of the one-on-ones that I've had with this particular person, can you create them a performance review? And it can do things like that too. And the sky's really the limit. What I really wanted you to do is have the opportunity to try out Fellow, check it out, and we're making a special offer available to all our listeners. So just go to fellow.ai/thisnewway to try Fellow. There's a discount code in there for you if you decide to continue with it. Either way, I would love for you to try it and let me know what you think. And with that said, let's go back to the episode. Awesome. So yeah, so startup experience, big company experience. So this is kind of where you all formed the idea for Halo. So let's talk about how you run this company. Again, you're an AI native team, 3 people doing insane things that would require multiple companies. And so maybe we can start with that topic. So Hari, you were kind of explaining to me that in building this product, that it's almost like you're building, several companies in one, because in order to be able to solve the types of problems you're looking to solve, you've had to build a bunch of different things. Maybe you can just, roughly talk about what that is and how AI makes that possible. And, if this were like, say, 10 years ago, that what you're doing wouldn't have been possible. And maybe you would have needed, like, I don't know, 100 people to do the same thing.
I think one of the crazy things is that 10 years ago, you didn't even have LLMs, even 5 years ago. And so just like this level of power. So I don't even know if 1,000-person team could have done it, unless so it's very fascinating. But what we're trying to build in order to build this kind of intelligence is you've got this org brain that has this digital twins of the person that you're talking with and also the organization that supports the right conversation, simulates different outcomes and says which one is really the one that has like high impact or which time frames are the most urgent to make this call by. And then of course you've got to build, how do you audit where people saying there's a whole audit company that would have been there 5 years ago, right? Like, how do you have all this information that people are saying and then AI interprets that to speech to text? How do you actually make sure that's all correct consistently? And then over time, I'm sure your audience probably knows about hallucination, where the information mutates. And so if you have a small error and it compounds and compounds through every time an agent picks it up and hands it off, picks it up, hands it off, and it just grows and grows and grows.
It's like a game of telephone, right? Like
Mhm, exactly. And you're talking about hundreds of agents that are all playing telephone with each other. And so that's why we have this huge influx of AI infra companies that are being funded and developed right now, because anyone who tries to build a tool like Halo is going to realize, oh my gosh, there's so many technical challenges here. But what we found is that the rate of progress is so high that teams are able to build tools that were just startups 2 years ago, like just to audit information, or how do you protect and how do you do privacy? How do you do a project management software, right? We built our own project management software behind the scenes. That's how we can do all the calculations around the impact and the assessment and the prolonged time frame and the quantification of the cost. Project cost estimation, that used to be its own software back in the day. So there's all sorts of things that a team can now do well if they actually have the right talent on the team and they're able to the technology continues to evolve the way it is.
Maybe you can talk through some of the just like the complexities. So you built so these conversations happen, and I guess like a bulk of the work is, some of the work is during the conversation, but I get the sense that it's pretty compute heavy once the conversation is over, because you're analyzing the conversations and doing some crazy things with it. So what kind of tools did you have to build in order to make those things possible? And then maybe talk about some of the challenges also.
So whenever we're doing something really cutting edge like this, a lot of tools don't exist, so they're being developed. And as folks like us do this, or other YC companies, what you're going to have is you're going to have people realize there's no evaluation frameworks. Do I need to explain what evaluation is?
I mean, yeah, so evals, yeah, let's talk about that. That's actually very important. It's a term that I think everybody in AI will start to, well, everybody kind of works with it if you're building an AI product. But what's interesting is that it used to be like we all, when this stuff started, was we all used to think that the secret sauce is in the prompt. But now a lot of people are thinking actually the secret sauce is in the eval framework. So, or the evals that you use. So maybe you can kind of talk through.
And Shweta is way more of an expert on this than I am. I'll just say, like, briefly, the kind of when somebody says something and an analyst is going to provide an opinion on that, how do you know that opinion is worth anything? Because ChatGPT, as you know, when you talk to it, can make anything sound like they're right. Like, you can be like, oh, yeah, that makes total sense. Then you look at it like even closer sometimes and you're like, wait a second, actually, that doesn't make sense. Or that's a really smart way of like messing this whole thing up. Like, there's just a lot of those kind of nuances that people, especially trained people, are really good at, but how do you systematically build that in? And those kind of tools just didn't exist a year ago, or 2 years ago in any reasonable, reliable way. So I don't know, Shweta, if you want to share more about eval.
So, just to give you how HaloVision works, once a conversation happens, like you said, it's compute heavy afterwards. And of course, there is tons of stuff that we do during the conversation so that the conversation is the highest value output that we get. So every question has to be that is asked afterwards is like very tailored to get our highest value output. Once you have this transcript, that you have to what we do is create knowledge assets, and these assets then turn into what you call the org digital twin, and the individual digital twin. Most of the process in between, the two major things that Hari pointed out is, one is the reasoning capability of the model to come to a estimate on like the project management score, like, okay, what is the impact of what was said here, how does it tie to the overall goal of the company, what will it move, for example, if this risk comes in, what out of the 100 things that are on the board, what are the things that it's going to move most. There is a logical reasoning component that comes to that piece of information, and we're collecting a lot of data from that conversation, right? So that needs to be tested. Is that reasoning sound? And there are so many frameworks that are out there to evaluate the reasoning of the models. The other piece is the summarization and synthesis. So once the conversation happens, when we're creating these knowledge assets, we want to understand, okay, the nuanced understanding of the conversation, was that translated into something meaningful in a summary? How do you test that? And then there is a lot of like correctness check, LLM as a judge, hallucinations check. Like, you're going to do all of these things that determine whether the output, the synthesis in the summary that was done after the conversation, does that have the right information within it. And we tried a lot of tools that were out there that actually give people out of the box experience to do these evals and to do these checks, but they were not good enough for us with their level of
Yeah, can we give a just like a super concrete example? Like, what's one thing that you needed an eval for?
For example, let's say that there is a conversation that has happened and there is a summary statement, X person said Y, and this is the reason why they said that. There is tracing that needs to be associated with that summary from one conversation, from one chunk of information in that transcript. That evidence needs to be tied to that piece of summary that was created, because that is then going to be fed into multiple layers of information that's transformed over time. And that's just one way of, one person's transcript. Now you say you have 20 different transcripts going in, and what you want to do is, for every summarization, you want to track all of the evidence that is associated with it. And for us, evidence is the transcript itself, like the piece of information. When you do synthesis on top of those 20 pieces of information, what is the final output that you're getting? This is, the final output could be, this is the problem statement that the company has. And the reason why we think this is a most important problem to solve is because 5 other people said it. And here is the context of why they said it. And here is the reasoning of like why, this is a high impact. Because it calculated based on the information that it had, and that the dollar value assigned to this problem is X amount. Now, to do that piece of information, again, you're going through these pieces of summaries. And any little error, let's say there was an error with one piece of summary, it did not, initially, we were not tracking transcripts because that's a lot of, compute that you're adding at every level. And that's a lot that's feeding into the context of every, prompt that is doing the analysis, right? What we realize is when you don't add that, a small error could then compound. And at the end of it, when you say problem one, this is the problem, here is what people are talking about, and this is why this problem is an important thing, there could be minor errors that actually completely change the way that we think about like what the problem is.
Okay, so the eval then, what I'm understanding is you take a transcript, you draw some conclusion. You need to make sure that the conclusion is correct because if it's not correct, it's going to be cascading and it will, cause, again, we talked about the game of telephone. You don't want that. So the evals that you're creating is you're basically, it's almost like test cases to make sure that the conclusion was this. Let me make sure, look at the evidence and verify that this conclusion was the right conclusion from the evidence. Is that correct?
And that is correct. And that, it's LLM as a judge. But you could also do things like let, and that's what one of the things that we do is you could have multiple agents debate whether the particular summary that's extracted from this transcript, is that the right interpretation or not? And why is it not, if it is not? And then you have all of the reasons that actually then feed into the final thing. I'll add one more layer of complexity here. When I talk about all of these transcripts, that's like time equal to one. But now you're talking about time in the past. So you have longitudinal context coming in for every individual as well. And so how do you bring the relevant piece of information for that particular problem that is longitudinally sound? Because something that happened 6 months ago is not relevant anymore, even though it's solved or not solved. So how do you like make sure that you're maintaining the state of all of the problems in the right way? And that also, yeah.
That makes sense. Yeah. So it's interesting. It's almost like a fact checker, right? So if I am a journalist, and I write something, there's just like this extra little bit of checking. And the other thing that you talked about is LLMs as judges, and there's a lot of creative ways that people are, of course, using LLMs as judges. This idea that maybe you have multiple agents, maybe there's 5 of them, they check the thing, and if like 3 of them agree, then or like if all of them don't agree, you get a more powerful, more expensive model to do the tiebreaker. And yeah, so this is again lots of interesting things around evals, but you had to build your own. So what was the rationale for having to build your own? And what is like the state of, because there are a bunch of like eval framework companies and a lot of people are paying attention to this.
I can answer one piece of that, and I would love Hari your intake. A lot of the tools that we are seeing today, there is eval frameworks have something called as the ground truth. And every answer that the LLM gives, there is a comparison to what the right answer is, and then you have all of these frameworks, the correctness, all of that. In our case, the ground truth could be many different things. It is based on the person who's evaluating that piece of information at that point of time. This is not fact based information. This is what people are saying, thinking, feeling, and we're translating that into summaries that are going to be meaningful to create a impact across the organization. So that in a coach comes in may interpret that information differently from an engineer. And so it was very important for us to build system that actually adhere to that kind of the complexity of reasoning. And today's solution did not give us the capabilities to hand off, doing one piece of eval, then passing into the chain of another eval, then doing a chain of another one. We have chains of evals because this is so complex, and maybe this chain won't exist in the future as models mature. You might get a, I mean we saw that shift immediately, what we had with GPT-4 and how it transformed what we were doing with GPT-5. It was the chains like drastically reduced, but they're still there. And so the ability to build those chains was not very easy with current solutions. But Hari, do you go ahead? Can you uh, what is your perspective on this?
I think, and you started off by talking about prompt engineering. And back in the day, that was thought to be magical, a very important thing to do, right? And it still is. It's super important. The prompts are really, really key. But at some point, like, I don't know, 2 years ago, we started moving towards this whole idea of context engineering, where really the challenge is now, how do you get exactly the right information to a prompt? Because the problem is the model is very smart. As you said, it's like a PhD and everything. It's super smart. But like if you walk up to the smartest person in the world at a bar and you're like, "Hey, give me some life advice." What are they gonna say? They don't know anything about you, right? And so it's really important that they know exactly, they have all the right information to make the call, because if they don't, then whatever advice they give you isn't gonna be that good. So now you start saying, "Okay, well, how do I get exactly the right information from all these different sources that we've got, right? The right bit from this transcript, the right meta-analysis of the state of this project, the right analysis, the right take on how this guy's incentives map to this guy's incentives over here, and which of these is priority according to the actual gatekeeper involved and not just what the leader says," right? You have all these different variables in play, and you've got to bring exactly the right things to the leader, because if not, they're going to give you totally different advice. And so now we're not only doing that, but we're taking a step back and saying, "Hey, agents, I want you to do that for us." Now, the agent's judgment has to be really good. And if you look at where the tools were a year ago, I can't speak to today because honestly, I haven't looked at those today, but a year ago, they did not allow any sort of auditability or tracing at the level we're talking about, where you say, did they bring the right thing in from the right source at the right time? Did they actually make the right decision here? And if so, how do I audit that? Like, show me the trace. Prove to me that what you just claimed is actually true by showing me the whole chain of what you did, why, and the reasons for all of those things. And I can't just say, hey, Lang chain or whatever, like whoever, whatever the tool is today. Like, just add this explanation on here because my artifact is actually a construct that I created like 3 abstractions ago that was built in. Like, it's just too many layers and too many things that are happening in order to just insert it into a workflow like that. Because really, honestly, like, a lot of those guys are designing for the folks who are going to pay the most right now, which is like enterprises, and their use case is going to be a lot simpler and it's not going to be nearly as complex as we're trying to do. So that's why we had to build a lot of our own custom tools, because between the time when we request a feature and get that feature developed, it just wasn't as high priority because there just aren't as many startups that are paying for like the volume.
Hey everyone, hope you're enjoying the episode. One of the common things that we hear is, hey, you all talk about all these different tools, you walk through these demos. Sometimes it's hard for me to follow along. We decided to do recently was take all the things that we talk about, put them in a weekly newsletter. We literally list all the tools, we link to them, and any demo that we walk through, we break it down step by step, put it in this newsletter so it's super easy for you to follow along. And the other nice thing is that if there's someone on your team that you think could benefit, they're working on that subject area, they could use a little bit of AI injection into their workflow, send them the newsletter, send them that particular episode. We make it super easy to do that. It's free to sign up. All you have to do is go to thisnewway.com, enter your email address, and you'll get this weekly email from us. Hope you enjoy it. With that said, let's go back to the episode. This is super interesting, right? Because even from, when LLMs first came to the scene and people started asking them questions and it would hallucinate. And then just like this basic trick, like before, I mean, these days, when you ask ChatGPT something, it will show you its sources. But just this basic idea of, show me your sources gave you this confidence that this is higher likelihood that this is factual information. And so I can see for you all, if you're going to make a recommendation to the CEO, I mean, that you got to know the sources and you got to be able to trace and debug this kind of information. So it's very interesting, and for everybody listening in, what's interesting about this is as you're building these kinds of things, at the edges, you will have to come up with your own solutions because a lot of this stuff is early. And the other thing I might take away from your conversation is that even as you're building these things, as the models progress, sometimes you might throw away some of the things that you built because now the models are just better. But that's how it is with LLMs. So here we are.
Oh, I know, and it's one of those things where we upgraded to GPT-5. I remember because now we're on like 5, there's 5.2, and we've actually some of our uses now on Gemini because Gemini's crushing it right now. And so, but just that shift from GPT-4 or whatever it was like to 5, it threw a bunch of our users off because small things like it's very smart, but it's EQ tanked, right? And that's one of the big changes that OpenAI tried to correct. And all of a sudden, our users are like, "Why is this feeling all cold?" And like it's hyper analytical, but it's almost too analytical. And I miss that old, and I'm sure you've heard about this, where people miss the old GPT-4 voice.
They were like, yeah, romanticizing with this GPT-4, spending hours a day.
And it's fascinating to see what different LLMs interpret because some will look at it and say, hey, the problem is your process. It's A, B, and C. Others are going to say the ones that are higher EQ might say, no, no, no. Actually, the core issue here is this person feels like they're out of the loop or they're just sort of being undermined right now. And so it also changes the judgment calls. When you start changing judgment calls like that, then you've got to change your evaluation also to say, hey, like what is correct? Because you have smarter eval models now. You have the ability to have more nuanced takes. The model's context of just increased by an order of magnitude in order to be able to do analysis. So it's just a lot of things that are changing at the same time, which is very exciting. But it also means that a lot of the tools in play keep changing, which is why it's so difficult for startups to survive. And some will, and obviously many will, but it's just you get outdated so fast. Like what we were building used to be science fiction a year ago.
So this is super interesting, and as we get closer to time, my this is like a very futuristic view of the world, right? And some people may be listening in and thinking, "Oh my God, I'm going to actually talk to an AI agent and tell it these confidential things, and it's going to be super smart. It's going to know me, and then it'll ask me like very pointed questions, and they're not just random questions from a list, but they're like really well thought out because it's considering all these other things that are happening and asking like the most relevant questions. It sounds very futuristic. So I thought it'd be really cool to actually see a demo. You also, I've never tried this, by the way. This we're gonna do this live, and as you know, with live demos, they always have their quirks. But yeah, maybe walk me through it. I'd love to have a conversation with Halo. How does this work?
This is just an example of our internal view after a few conversations. This isn't shared with the client. This is what we look at. So we know just after a
Hmm.
few interviews, and this is real data, we just changed all the names, the industry and stuff. We know that the CEO is constantly jumping into low level engineering choices. It's creating a triangle communication effect. Decisions are waiting a week, confusing ownership. The hit is about this much, because the company burn, we're approximating to be 300K a month. We're hearing from one person that the decisions are being slipped by a week. There's a certain level of severity, and then how often does this happen? So we're sort of constantly assessing like how often does this happen? By when does a decision have to be made? Why is it this a certain priority level? Like what metrics are we paying attention to? Who are the key stakeholders that are involved? What is the success criteria? What are the next steps for Halo? And so each of these is like a mini summary of a case file, and each case file is a different challenge that we're seeing the company experience. Like, the team is burnt out. We know two senior ICs are close to quitting. And the reason this is important is because those two folks, if they leave, is going to hit the critical path capacity by 30%, causing a 4-week slip to the design freeze. That's huge. And that is actually a P0 from a Halo perspective, which, and might be something for the executive to look into. But we have all the reasons as to why this is happening. What does the executive need to do? Like what sort of things could actually work to prevent this? And we're not going to share it's Kajal and Sam who are about to quit. But these are the kind of things that we know there's a disconnect in what the plan says. So like we have this visibility across the company for good things, for rough things. And based off all of this, we know, okay, well, like, what does the CEO actually care about? And how do we frame it to the CEO? Because a lot of ICs don't know that, right? A lot of engineers are constantly they don't know how to, like I didn't when I was an engineer in my last role, even just how to represent this to a VP in a way that's going to get buy-in. It's a struggle, especially when you're limited on time. You see them once a month or once every few weeks, or even if you see them weekly, it's pretty difficult because you don't know all the stuff in their head. But Halo lives in each person's world every day, and so because of that, it has the ability to get buy-in as needed. So I hope that sort of gives you a quick example of just like the raw data.
And
It's
all that
very
whole
summarized.
spreadsheet,
Yeah, this is kind of old, but this was a
the
version
whole
of
spreadsheet
one
is
year.
I just wanted to say that the whole spreadsheet is automated. So like AI, it's not humanly generated. AI creates it. So after learning through multiple conversations.
Okay, yeah, I mean, that looks amazing. I'm just, finding your email as well,
Okay, so
and
I
so
sent it to
yeah, I
Avian.
so I have it, so I'm just gonna type my so I'm just typing my name and my company website and my phone number and my email, and then okay, view discussion agenda. Your call is ready. So let me also move to this screen here. Okay, so let's
Let's
give
do
it a
it.
try. I'm going to click on start your strategic discussion. Okay, I don't know if we can see this on screen, but it's probably kind of. Anyway, so this call is happening. Oh, I just have to put the volume on. Maybe it was talking.
Did it call you? Did it call you on your phone?
Oh, yes. You know what? I am getting a call. I just aggressively blocked everything. Okay, so there we go. Hello?
Hi, Aidan, I'm here with you. And just to reassure you, this conversation is encrypted, confidential, and any insights are anonymized before being aggregated. Today's agenda has four possible starting points: year in review, what didn't get done, team and people, and setting up for next year. Where would you like to start?
Um, you know, let's do team and people.
Perfect, we'll start with team and people. First, looking at this past year, what are you most proud of about your team's performance or evolution?
Yeah, I would say I really like that we have a team that gets better every year.
When you say gets better, what specifically improved this year? Capability, accountability, collaboration, or something else?
Yeah, I would say all three.
If you had to pick one of those three as the biggest step change this year, which one would it be? And why that one?
Yeah, I would say capability. I was part of the team. You know, as a company, we became more AI native. We adopted new tools, and that helped us deliver more and go faster.
Becoming more AI native is a big shift. What did your team have to unlearn or stop doing to really get the benefit from those new tools?
Yeah, that's a good question. We had to unlearn a lot of things. Um, had to really rethink actually a lot of processes. So it wasn't about doing the same things but doing them faster, but just understanding that with the new capabilities at our disposal that there are different ways of doing things and those different ways can have better impact.
That mindset shift is non trivial. Where did you see the biggest friction or resistance as people tried to rethink those processes?
Yeah, this is going very deep.
Yeah,
Okay.
it's
I think I'll we can stop right here. But yeah, this is going to be soul searching. Oh my.
yeah. This is a
I
reflection bot, so it actually
I
helps.
thought this was going to be like surface level, multiple choice questions. This is like, I felt like I had to go lie down while I'm talking to this virtual therapist here.
I think that you also, I don't know if I think Shweta might have mentioned it, but you got the reflection agent for the end of the
Oh, the
year.
reflection
You
one?
got the
Okay,
end of the
cool.
year
So
reflection. I mean, they all will dig deeper and they all will go, but usually there's just much more present topics that are top of mind for you. And so we're gonna say, hey, CEO, like what are you most concerned about? You might be like, yo, sales right now or engineering. And we'll go figure that out and come back to you and say, okay, so for sales, here's what's happening. And what do you think about this? So it's much
Mhm.
more goal oriented, action oriented. It's still gonna be reflective, but on a more like as needed basis.
the only other thing I'll say is, so this is really cool. Congrats on on building this stuff. We don't often show a lot of like just one demo, but I thought the reason I wanted to really chat with you all is because it just kind of shows this paradigm of what the company of the future will look like. And I know like people might be thinking, oh my God, this is crazy. I'm going to be talking to an AI, but this stuff is happening more and more. And it's interesting, Shweta, you said this like early on in the conversation, and I agree. There is something different when you talk to an AI in that there's this feeling of there's no judgment and I can just say the things and not have to really change the way I say them. And so this is kind of I think, like a lot of the powerful stuff. One interesting related example is I know there's this company called One Mind. I don't know if you all have seen. It's sort of like AI um, e- account executive. So it's an AI salesperson, and it's really cool, and it turns out that when people talk to this AI, salesperson, that they talk to it in a different way, right? So they kinda, like, need a specific piece of information, and there's no niceties, there's no, "Hello, how are you?" It's like, "Show me this, show it to me right now, do it fast," you know? And so it's just like the use cases are different, and anyway, so I I I think, like, it's not the same as a one-on-one with your manager. This is a new use case, and so when you think of it like that, imagine if you didn't do as many one-on-ones. I mean, that would save a lot of time for organizations everywhere.
We
Yeah,
we
and
like to think that
or
one-on-ones are still important just for that connection and the human aspect. It's just that we found that this helps make one-on-one so much more effective because the managers know exactly what to focus on. They're able to help the employees, and the employees are like, "Oh my god, like Bob or Sue is so much more effective now." Like we've got that feedback that I just feel more focused because of Halo. Our manager is like really changed how they manage the team because of Halo. So we found it improves relationships because we're able to sort of be that mediation layer.
I love it. So, yeah, this has been great. Thank you all. Thank you both for coming on the show and talking about this stuff. As a final question, what are you all the most excited about what AI will do in the next year? Like, is there anything that you're looking forward to, a trend that you're excited about? Yeah, what's the thing that keeps you most excited?
I'm personally very excited about scientific analysis and research advancements. I think that I don't know if I think there's this MIT paper on this that was retracted, but like I believe that it will have a huge impact on the future, and that means for the future of medicine, all of those things. I'm excited to see how AI being more strategic, and I'm seeing like higher, more and more advanced frameworks in academia that allow AI to coordinate amongst themselves and be more strategic, can unlock new scientific discovery and medical advances. That's what I'm super stoked about.
I think that is amazing. And to add to that, I feel like there is this shift in what does being human and what are the higher order tasks that humans will do in the future. Like there is shift coming in, like software engineers are now having AI copilot to do the software work, and now we spoke about management. As we go in the future, like what does you know all of the work that we do, how does that change? We have to like think through that a little bit, and I feel like it's exciting as well as a little bit scary for everybody.
We're very on the pro-human camp also, which is why we like, because like we as ICs felt we weren't heard, and we wanted to actually do something that would be in the best interest of employees and really like represent them well, which means it has to be trusted. And so, but there's so many dueling narratives about how AI can play out. And that's why we feel like we have to be the ones building in it because we
Yes.
want to create that world, right? Where it's like trustworthy, where and it's not just like employee surveillance. It's like someone that champions people and lifts people up. And that you have to bake into the system, because AI can do anything. It's just kind of the morality of the developer also matters a lot.
Great conversation and great place to end it. Thank you both for joining.
Thanks so much for having
Thank
us.
you.
And that's it for today. Thank you so much for tuning into this episode of This New Way. If you like the content, be sure to rate, review, and subscribe so you can get notified when we post the next episode. See you next time.